Welcome back to the Crash the Pond podcast. Happy early Thanksgiving. So, by the time that you're listening to this, it's going to be Thanksgiving week. So, hopefully, everybody is staying safe and responsible during this very peculiar holiday season. Let's just put it that way. But wishing everybody the best. We've got a lot to be thankful for, even though it doesn't always seem that way. But going into this podcast, we've got a few things to talk about, Ducks related. We kind of sort of have news to talk about. It's not major news. It's actually kind of the opposite of major. But we do have some news to talk about. Jake, do you want to take a guess at what those news are?
Is the news is it the NHL Network list?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna say it's
Yes.
either that or the World Junior Camp. But real quick, you want to give the people a little bit of insight of why we started 3 minutes late or 4 minutes late?
Technical issues. Right?
No,
Like that's
no. It was the fact that at 7:59, Felix and I decided that we were going to pour out some whiskey and have this be a little bit of a fun podcast here.
well. That was you're really overstating my
The
kind
we,
of role.
the we.
The role in this decision. I mean, I support the decision, but you were definitely the main driver
Yeah.
of this idea, which I'm fine with. You know, sometimes you need that wild card element.
I mean, gotta have the wild
As I
card.
take a healthy sip. So yeah, let's. It's gonna be kind of more of a laid back episode, folks. You know, we're usually kind of hopefully professional and keeping it really tight in terms of our script. But this week, it's a holiday week for a lot of people. I personally have a couple days off starting Wednesday, so I'm excited. I'm feeling relaxed, or as relaxed as is possible in this year. So
So,
let's
Wait, seeing as you're relaxed here,
mhm.
I'm gonna go with a
Yes.
wild card right now.
Oh
Last
dear.
episode,
Oh dear.
we did Jersey talk for a fair amount, and a big part of that Jersey talk was expectations going into the Monday Jersey release. We have not actually done a podcast since they
That's true.
released the reverse retro jerseys. So I
That's
think we should
actually-
do a brief little recap of what they were like, what ones
This is true.
missed the mark from what we expected when we recorded last week. Let's do a quick recap of, because I think there's one that comes to mind, or two that instantly come to mind, of ones that look like they were going to be great based upon
I feel
the teaser.
I feel like we've talked about this jersey now for like 4 episodes in a row.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of news lately, Felix.
This jersey has single-handedly dominated our podcast.
But we also did a Patreon episode on it, so that's a big reason why.
I mean, it counts.
But
Still counts.
the two, and let me get your take on this. The two that looked so good when we went through the aesthetic article last week that just turned out awful in comparison to those. Not awful, but worse, I guess, than those two. The Dallas Stars are the first one.
Okay. Well, why don't we start with the Ducks just real quickly?
Okay.
Let's just give a Ducks, a preference here. So the Ducks jersey is pretty much what everybody expected. For the Jersey dorks like us two, some little minor tweaks. So officially they brought back the original Wild Wing logo, no alterations to Wild Wing's jersey color. The bottom stripe is teal, which I think some people didn't necessarily expect.
It's jade.
No, well, it's a very dark jade.
Yes, it's not teal. The Ducks have never had teal in their color scheme.
Well, I've heard some people say that it's teal. So I
Yes,
don't know.
there are
what to
people out there
believe in.
that say it's teal, but those are not actual people that are in the know on the Ducks organization. It's jade.
Well,
There's
that jade is darker than the jade on the shoulders, for example. I'm
What?
talking about the one on the bottom of the jersey.
The bottom's the same color as the top.
No, it's darker.
I think you're lying here. I have it on screen right now, and
Why would I be lying?
I think you're lying. No, I'm staring at it, but fair enough. For sure. I disagree.
Okay,
but
so
sure.
you agree. We agree on we have equal vision capabilities. That's good. Anyway, so yeah, I mean those are really the only tweaks, right? I mean we're really grasping at straws here. Your thoughts, your final just
Love
set
it.
in stone thoughts.
Love it.
Love
Bonnie's in our Twitch chat right now, just slandering this jersey, and I'm not gonna have it.
Really hate it. Some people really despise it.
And it's funny. I think a big reason, I mentioned this in our text message, I think a lot of it has to do with your age, and especially with when you saw this jersey. I think the big reason why I love this is the nostalgia of it. It goes back to my childhood. It makes me think of the Mighty Ducks cartoons. I don't think I actually ever saw this jersey in action. I don't have any recollection of that, but when I see this, I think of the Mighty Ducks cartoon, and I think of Wild Wing and that. And to me, that just makes me happy. And I think the thing that I think everyone should get around to on this is that this is what the reverse retro program was meant to be. It was meant to be you going with something in your past that wasn't exactly this perfect jersey, wasn't meant to be this great thing, and then modified in some ways. It was supposed to be a really fun program. This is not meant to be a jersey that sticks with the franchise forever, that is going to be the third or fourth jersey forever. That's not what this program was intended to do. This program was intended to take something from the past, something in the past, modify it in some ways, whether that's to your current colors or in different things, but make some modification to it to create a fun new look for everyone out there to potentially do. And I mean, I think that this was a direct, not a competition, but because of the fact that you look at the NBA, look at the amount of jerseys that they're putting out, and what are you would probably know better than me being a bigger NBA fan, but don't they have like different names for the different types of jerseys that they have?
Yeah. So like there's the association jersey.
Yeah.
They actually don't have home or away or an alternate. They have, I think, 4 different kinds of variations that have, kind of unique names.
Yeah.
So,
but I think but every team kind of has this unique, weird looking jersey. The one that comes to mind right away is the Miami Heat having their Miami Vice jersey. And it's something unique, something different, something that can transcend the sport in some ways because of how cool looking it is. And to me, that's what this program was about. And that's what this Ducks jersey does. It creates this very unique, very different jersey that is going to split the masses, because it's funny, I read a couple different articles about ranking the different jerseys, and it was pretty clear based upon the age of the person where they were going to put it. The couple of people that I read that loved it were all typically similar age to you and me, someone that grew up in the 90s with these colors, with the Mighty Ducks cartoon, with a lot of these different things. And then people who hated it are more so a little bit of the older generation, probably people that didn't like the fact that Disney owned a team, or that it's too cartoony, too childish, different things like that. And so it's really split. But I think the thing that I can say about this jersey is I think that this is the one jersey out of all of these that will go above hockey, where you'll see people outside of the hockey community wearing this jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're really high on it. I like the jersey more as a concept. I like that they're trying something different, and because they did have other options. They didn't have a ton of other options, but they could have done something different.
They had basically 2 other options. I mean, I guess theoretically they could have taken the Mighty Ducks jersey and done a black and orange version of it.
They could have done that. They could have taken the Anaheim jersey, the third jersey, the kind of purple, darker purple one, or eggplant. Sorry to call it purple. So they had some options, and they went this route. And this is easily the boldest and most potentially controversial route. So I applaud them for doing that. If I were really a diehard fan of this team, would I be running out to buy this jersey? Maybe, maybe not.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, but that's just because that's your kind of vibe. You like these kind of more out there jerseys.
I like unique.
But other people don't.
No,
and that's totally fine.
Jersey and your feeling about jerseys, it's all completely subjective.
I can't believe we're having this conversation again.
I mean,
I'm legit getting just deja vu right now.
Yeah, yeah. But real quick, so let's just do a top tier, bottom tier. Mm-hmm. Just ones that you loved. I mean, real quick, I said the ones that came out worse than the aesthetics view or look. Minnesota and Dallas are the 2 that I'm thinking of, where Minnesota came out basically exactly how they predicted, but instead of using that M logo from their shoulders, they used the Wild logo and recolored it.
Okay.
The jersey's fine, but it's just that M logo made me.
But it's still a really good looking jersey. I think.
But it's worse than what I was expecting.
I mean, it could potentially be better. The Wild have one of the better logo, in my opinion, in pro sports, and so I think it looks great in those colors. I think it's kind of true to the concept. So,
what do you think about the Dallas one, though? The Dallas one with the white on the bottom looks weird.
I mean, again, if you if you're purely looking at it from an expectation of what it was going to be, then yeah, you might be a little disappointed because the rumored version of this jersey was better, but it's still kind of cool looking. It's out there. It's a more aggressive version of their original jerseys, or not all the way original, but kind of their late '90s jerseys. And the fact that they went all white, it's certainly a look, but I think it'll look sick on the ice. I mean, the guys are going to look really flashy with these jerseys, so I'm fine with that. I think it's still a good jersey.
All right, let's real quick. Top tier. Give me your top 5. Doesn't have to be
So
in any order. Just top 5, bottom 5.
so my favorites. So in my top 5, I'd have the Tampa Bay Lightning's jersey because I love that they went back to their original look, but put the blue in it while keeping the black as well. So it's just this really nice meld of the two eras of jerseys. So I'd have that one in the top 5. After that, I have the San Jose Sharks in my top 5. I love that they finally went back to the original Sharks logo, and I think the gray looks good. It's maybe not the preferred look for some fans, but I still think it's a good jersey overall. I really like the Capitals jersey. I love the fact that they just did exactly what we talked about with reverse retro, picked an older jersey and just gave it the current colors. So love that. I think you kind of just have to put Lady Liberty in the top 5, even though even though the jersey itself is kind of bland, they're gonna look great on the ice. So I'm gonna put it in my top 5. And then to round out the top 5, I mean, this is really tough because there's a lot of different candidates. I will just throw in the Ottawa Senators because I've always loved the Sens original jerseys, and I think it looks awesome in red, so I'm putting it in there. But this is just kind of an off-the-cuff list. I can make arguments for others, but these are the top 5 for me.
My top 5, the no particular order, except I can clearly say what the top 2 are. The top 2 are the Ducks and the Coyotes for me. Those for me are just the top 2, and then outside of that, the 3 I like outside of that, I probably would put the Quebec or not the Quebec, the Colorado Avalanche jersey. It's just super clean, super good look. And then I would probably have the Washington Capitals jersey, like you said. It's just this might be the best Capitals jersey they've ever had. I think that logo is just so much better than their current logo, and I think in the red and blue color scheme, it looks so good. And then so what is that? That's 4 for me. So to round it out, I think I'm torn between 2 or 3 different ones basically, but you know what? I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers. I think the Florida Panthers look with that logo. It looks really good. It's a really, really clean look. And to be honest, this is my one thing about this. The reverse retro is not meant to create a jersey to replace your home and away, but the Florida Panthers jersey looks better than anything they wear now. And same thing with the Capitals. The 2 of the ones I picked are 2 that probably should just be their home and away, which isn't exactly the purpose of this reverse retro series.
My bottom 5, my bottom tier, Detroit Red Wings, easily in there. Boston Bruins, Toronto Maple Leafs, and then after that, the Jets. I mean, I don't hate that jersey necessarily, but it's just so bland.
The Thrashers jersey. The Thrash, using it instead of Atlanta, it says Winnipeg on the sleeve.
Okay, well then, and then my last one would probably be Chicago. I just don't care about that jersey. I know that some people think it's the best in the league and in sports, but I just don't care about it.
Got it.
But my only so one thing that I read, and I don't know if this is true, is that the Winnipeg franchise actually doesn't own the rights to the Thrashers logos and colors. So they're I don't know if that's true and how that could be overcome if they really wanted to go that route, but apparently they just don't have access. They're not able to use that look. So
are they not able to? I mean, not using the logo, I guess, would make some sense, but the entire
I also just think that there's no way that they would want to.
No, but I don't think there's a copyright on a jersey scheme. That wouldn't make sense.
I mean,
to me.
it's but if you're gonna bring back the jersey, you know, or if you're going to bring back the logo, you're probably going to want to bring back.
I'm not necessarily saying bring back the logo. What I'm saying is do that jersey, do it in whatever colorization, and use a Jets logo on it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And you put Winnipeg on the sleeve. That's a way where you don't have to deal with the copyright issues. I don't think you can copyright a jersey template. That wouldn't make any sense to me. but the logo, I guess, would. But who
You'd be
knows?
surprised. It's
So
very open-ended.
what
But
were
some other jerseys that I really liked that might not be as popular, I actually kind of like the Columbus Blue Jackets jersey just because it's kind of out there, and I like that they brought back that terrible original logo, and I kind of like this is easily the most boring one, but I kind of like the navy version of the Islanders in the Adidas cut. It just looks nice. It's classy.
why? It's so
It's
stupid.
just boring. It's boring.
It's not. They should have done the fisherman. They should have done the
Yeah,
fisherman. If you're gonna
but
like that, that's the thing, and that's where I give the Ducks so much props, and why even if you don't love the jersey, you have to give the team so much credit for bringing it back. Is that's the purpose of this entire series is
yeah,
to do
but
something funky.
that's your view.
But
That's your view.
no, but that
Um,
is legitimately the purpose of this is to have something unique, something different in your look that's only going to be used for a couple of games. The
Not
Islanders,
necessarily. There's nothing that says it has to be unique.
that was the purpose of this. I think regardless, I think we can both agree that's the reason why Adidas did this is they wanted to match kind of what the NBA has
And
done.
this will drive you up the wall. I kind of like the Predators jersey.
It's
Um,
fine. I don't
and
know.
then
I don't hate it.
and then
It's better than their current one.
another one that I really thought about putting in my top 5 was the Blues. I mean, it's just an awesome jersey. Love that era.
Blues and
of the
red looks
Blues.
weird though.
Yeah, but it's just a good jersey. It
Fair.
just looks good.
Fair.
The thing with the Nordiques one, it just feels weird to bring it back in not the original colors. There's just something about that just doesn't make sense to me. But
I like it more that it's not in the original colors because honestly, that's my issue with the Hurricanes bringing back the Whalers jersey is that you didn't do anything to it necessarily, and so if you're gonna bring back the Whalers, do something to it. If you're doing it for the reverse retro, do it in red and black, or do something like that. Don't just do the blue and the green with it. This isn't meant to be a straight retro. And so that's where I actually like the fact that the Avalanche brought it back in burgundy and white because it's this more unique, more kind of tailored to the new franchise look. And
I mean, it's not really unique. It's just swapping the colors on it.
Fair, fair, fair,
it's taking
fair.
the exact. I mean,
Fair.
come on.
Fine.
Okay, but
So
let's move on from that.
What were I didn't
Let's
give
move
my
on.
bottom 5.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
you've just been rambling on it. You
Go-
gave
go-
you
go
gave
for your-
you gave
let's
your
hear your
bottom
bottom.
5, and then we're just kind of going on ones that you liked more.
Let's hear it.
So it's gonna be Detroit. Detroit barely tried. Edmonton, same type of thing, barely tried. Recolored shoulders, big deal.
I don't mind Edmonton's though.
It's they barely tried. They barely tried.
But you got to think about it for Edmonton though. They legitimately don't have
Yes,
that
they do.
many options.
They have one option.
One is not that many.
No, but they had the option. It's the same thing with the Islanders, though. The Islanders had one option, really, the fisherman, and they should have done it. Similar thing with the Oilers.
You are not approaching this from an objective point of view. You're just looking at this from
It's
how you
jerseys. So, yes, it's personal.
But you're not even trying to be objective. Anyway,
Why would I? It's jerseys.
continue.
It's all personal
Continue.
opinion. It's all
Continue.
personal opinion.
Okay.
So Red Wings, Oilers, Islanders are all in the bottom 3. Those are just without a doubt the complete bottom of the barrel for me. I'd throw Winnipeg there also. It's not a good jersey and it's very bad.
It's just boring.
It's not great. And then probably Chicago also. There's
Yeah,
my bottom 5.
Chicago's is just. It's just I've seen they've had so many different retro jerseys at this point. It's just
But it's also just like I'm not sure what's reverse about this.
yeah. Well, like for example, the Devils, even though neither of us have mentioned it so far, they basically did exactly what reverse retro would think it would do.
LA
They
Kings,
took
another one.
Yeah, I mean the Kings. Whatever.
No, but like that's what this is meant to be, though. It's
Yes.
meant to be taking something and modifying it. Like,
I like that-
that's my issue is that there are a bunch of teams that kind of half-ass this.
Honestly, my favorite jersey of all of these, it might be the Sharks. I just love that
You're
jersey.
so wrong.
I just love that jersey.
It's not bad.
That-
It's not a bad one, but it's very
you know what
middle
I read?
of the road.
They wrote an article, really good article on NHL.com about the creator of that logo, and it was just cool to hear kind of the behind the scenes. And apparently, the Sharks' original jersey was the second highest selling jersey of that era of any sport. It was second behind the Chicago Bulls jersey in the 90s. when it
Really?
came out. Yeah.
Huh.
So it's just an iconic look, and I just think that they nailed it, and they just need to go back to this. Just stop messing around. Um, so yeah, jerseys are fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Jerseys are very fun. I'm surprised neither of us mentioned Pittsburgh. I kind of like the
I don't mind
Penguins
it.
jersey.
It's
Yeah,
middle of the road.
it's solid. I
Yeah.
think that it does what you would expect in a reverse retro. Um,
Scientific Lance asked, "What do you think of the Flames jersey?" Flames is top tier for me. It's just
I'm
below top
surprised
5.
I haven't. We neither of us have mentioned it. Yeah, I like the Flames jersey. I think I actually think I like this better than the predicted version
I agree.
with just the black stripes at the bottom instead of those being red or white, because I think it makes the two stripes, the red and yellow stripes, pop more, and
Yeah,
it's a really good looking jersey.
Calgary may have one of the best looks in the NHL for this upcoming season.
Oh yeah, I mean they've figured. It's this shocking thing that happens when you just listen to your fans, how much
Ducks,
your approval rating will go up.
Ducks, listen to this right now.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I mean, it's funny how much that applies to the eggplant and jade.
I also, I mean, now we're just going to talk about every single jersey. I also really like the Sabres.
Oh yeah, the Sabres is a very, very good look. And I heard some people not liking that it says Buffalo in the waist strap. I
That's
love
what
it.
the original jersey had.
I know. They just think that it's not a good look. I love it. I think it adds, it's unique.
I remember using that jersey, the red version of it, in NHL 06 back in the day.
I feel like you've said this on a podcast already.
I don't think I have.
Maybe.
I mean, I probably said something similar to it.
It's possible.
But yeah, I played hours of NHL 06, and so I remember this jersey very well. I guess I have to tokenly talk about the Canadiens jersey, just because I'm sure someone might be wondering when I'm thinking about it. It's growing on me. It's growing on me. It's not a bad jersey. There's just something sacrilegious about this team being in blue that I will just never really totally be okay with. So there you go. Did you just drink? Did you just take a shot?
I have been listening to. Oh my God, Bonnie just threw in our Twitch chat, I think one of the most slanderous things, and I'm tempted to ban her for this.
Okay.
And she just said the Kachina jersey is too noisy.
Well, look, here's the thing with the Kachina jersey.
Bonnie.
It's a look, right? It's not meant to be this kind of mainstay home or away jersey. It's a one-off, right? It's just from a different era of the sublimated jerseys, and this is what you get when you go down that rabbit hole.
Well, the current one is
like
the reverse retro is the peyote. The Kachina is the one they're going to go
the
with.
actual Kachina, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both are great though. Regardless.
Either way, yeah, I think the Kachina is definitely good just because it's so unique, and I don't think it's that noisy. And I think for a franchise like Arizona, which I don't really know what's gone right for them in the last decade, any little bit of joy you can elicit out of your fans, I think, is worth taking on, and that's what they've done with the Kachina look. So good for them, because in the hockey side, it's been depressing.
Yeah.
So
there actually has been
having your GM quit before the playoffs start.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there.
Transitioning to actual hockey talk, there was actually something that neither of us had really planned to talk about, but we have a couple questions that mentioned this, and it reminded me. There was some chatter this week outside of the fact that there is ongoing negotiations between the NHL and Players Association that are going a little bit sideways, but I think overall, I mean, it's going to end up with the
They're not going sideways.
It went sideways a little bit, but I think it's going to end up all going where it should.
What people have to realize, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. You have to think about why this news is being put out there, right? Someone has a vested interest in this being made public, because if the NHL and the NHLPA wanted to make all of their negotiations private, they might not be able to do it 100%, but they could get very close. And so things get leaked in a negotiation to put pressure on the other side. And so the players, I'm assuming the players probably were the ones who aired these grievances or made them really apparent to the media. And so you get this impression as someone in the public thinking, oh yeah, this is just going down the drain, when in reality, we're just all being used as pawns in their greater game of getting the most money possible.
And so for anyone that missed it, there's ongoing negotiations between the Players Association and the NHL about how they're going to return to play. and there's negotiations with the NHL wanting the players to, I think, roll back some salary or defer some salary, different things like that. So there's a lot in the works. My opinion is it's gonna happen. There will be a deal that will
It's going to
happen.
happen.
The NHL will be playing in January. Is my
Everyone,
opinion.
no one benefits from there not being a season.
Agreed.
Right? Even if the players have to defer, or I guess even if the league has to defer too much of the salaries, or on the flip side of that, that the players get a combination that they don't really like, they still are worse off if there's no season. So
Yeah.
it's going to happen.
So, kind of as a part of that, though, there was also
Baseball
some
did it.
there was some more news about the realignment that has been widely speculated for a while now. Gray Wyshynski put out an article that basically the Ducks would be in a division with, it would be, what was it, San Jose, LA, Arizona, Vegas, Dallas, Colorado, and Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
It would be those 8 teams if it was 4 different 8-team divisions. He also speculated maybe you go to 5 divisions. And I don't recall exactly what teams would be in that, but that's his speculation. I don't really see a way 5 division makes any sense, mainly because you have the 7-team Canadian division, and you're not going to break that up in any way because there's going to be the Canadian division. I think that's pretty much going to happen. You're going to be playing only teams in your division, I think is pretty much set in stone also if you're going to do a Canadian division. So Ducks fans, get ready for a lot of pretty good teams. You're going to see a lot of LA, a lot of San Jose, a lot of Colorado, a lot of Vegas, a lot of Arizona, a lot of Dallas, a lot of Minnesota. So that's kind of the biggest news, I think, from that. To me personally, the playoffs, there was some chatter. Wish was mentioning he could see them doing 1 through 16. Personally, my opinion, and let me know your take on this. If you are doing a purely divisional regular season where you're only playing teams in your division, the thing that would make the most sense is do a divisional playoff. So 1 through 4 from every division makes the playoffs. 4 plays 1, 2 plays 3, and you go that way until you hit you hit the conference final, or you hit the, what would it be, the Stanley Cup semifinal. And that makes the most sense because the issue with going purely divisional is you're not crossing your division, so it's hard to really say, well, you have a team with a certain amount of points in one division versus a team with a certain amount of points in another division. How do they really compare because they're only playing teams in their division?
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, the thing that's kind of tricky with all this is that the world could be much different by the time that the NHL is in the playoffs. I mean, we see all the news coming out about the vaccines, and now they're talking about just starting to distribute to certain sectors of the population in December, early December. So, by the time May rolls around, who knows? I mean, it's just one of those things where I think right now, yes, you have to operate with the mind frame that, hey, this is what we're dealing with now is how it's going to be, and err on the side of caution.
I think divisional gives you that option anyways, though. And I think that's the benefit of it is that even if there's a vaccine, most likely you're not going to want teams traveling across country that much, going from town to town that much. So by doing it divisional, you're keeping it. Now, granted, the Ducks will be playing Minnesota, which is still a pretty long trek, but you're keeping teams geographically playing teams closer to them. And so
I would honestly be in favor of that playoff system just moving forward because it fosters rivalries.
I mean, that was the logic behind the current format, except they wanted to add the wild card for some fairness.
Yeah, which has kind of thrown things off. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I mean, it's something to follow. It sounds like the biggest takeaway from a Ducks perspective is the added teams, and it's going to make it harder. They don't really have
and so
they don't really have the kind of the in of being in the Pacific anymore for next season.
So that leads to this question that we got from Sean Siebel saying, could the competitiveness of the new Western Conference, I guess kind of in that term, the fact that it's a new Western division more so would be what it would be, would that be good for the Ducks, a higher potential to miss the playoffs? And he mentioned that the Ducks did show their flashes. They did play some solid games against some good teams last year. I think they played okay against Colorado. They played okay in a couple games against Vegas and didn't get completely torched by them. So the fact that they did play some better games against good teams, it may have a positive effect long term. But what do you think this means for the long-term impact of the Ducks?
It doesn't help. It's pretty simple. They're not a very good team right now. They're going to be playing better teams more often, so it hurts their playoff chances. I don't think that there's any other real answer. Now, if I were to expand on that a bit, I might say, well, playing those teams, you could get scenarios where you often see a good team kind of maybe looks past a weaker opponent. And so the Ducks maybe could catch those teams off guard more often. I also think that from a long-term perspective, it probably benefits the younger players in this roster to be playing higher level competition more often, as opposed to playing in the Pacific, the majority of the time, which has been the weakest division in the league for a little while now. So there's definitely some benefits to it, but just in terms of them being able to make the playoffs, I don't really see how it would help. I mean, at best, it's a neutral.
Yeah, at best it's a neutral. I think, yeah, the issue is not only are you now competing more closely with Colorado, with Dallas. I mean, we can clearly say that Colorado and Vegas are the two top teams in this division. They're pretty much locks to make the playoffs at this point in time with this current if it was divisional format. Dallas, I mean, there's maybe a fall off coming for them, but they just made the Stanley Cup final.
There's still the thing with Dallas is that they're just one of the more put together teams in the division,
and then
they're a known commodity.
And then underlying number wise, the Minnesota Wild were actually a pretty damn good team last year.
Well,
and they could be a fair amount better this upcoming year with the fact that you're going to have Kaprizov join them, Marco Rossi, your boy.
Yeah, I mean Kaprizov and Rossi, I think that they have. I mean, the Wild could be a surprise dark horse type team next year because, like you said, they were playing well down the stretch. And now that they don't have the coaching uncertainty that kind of clouded them last season, with the influx of high-level young talent. I mean, Byron Bader, who we've had on this show, who has the hockey prospecting model, he said that it's pretty much it's extremely rare to see a team get two players of that caliber injected into their lineup in the same season. He kind of likened it in a way to Kane and Taves joining the Blackhawks. And so, I mean, if it's anywhere close to that, the Wild could really take a huge step forward next season.
Yeah. Now I just realized something that I had not realized until this moment.
Let's hear it.
Seeing as you and I are going to be watching every Ducks game per usual and end up covering it with the podcast, you're going to be able... So if there's let's say it's a 60-game season or whatever... Mm-hmm. So you're going to be playing a fair amount against the division, potentially 10 games or so, maybe a little bit less than that, against the teams in the division. That means you're going to be able to see Marco Rossi potentially 10 times this season, Felix.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm very excited. So Bring it on.
Did not realize that until right now. So there's that. So with that being said, ready to move on to the next question. So basically, it's harder for the Ducks now. I think there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I just don't even know how you can spin it any other way.
You've essentially replaced the potential playoff teams of being Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary, and you've swapped them with Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's tougher.
It's a tough one.
So, all right. So this came from, let me really quickly get the correct person. I believe his account is Stevie Wonder. On Twitter, StepChicken883. He mentioned this to me a little bit ago, and we didn't get to it, so want to jump into it now. He said, just got wind, and this is from the ECHL's website, that the ECHL is looking to start on December 11th, so in a couple weeks. I don't know if there's an update on that actually happening, but with 13 teams from states that don't believe in COVID, basically Florida, South Carolina, Texas, and the Ducks affiliate, the Tulsa Oilers, being one of them. With a potentially large gap between the start of the NHL AHL season, who are some players prospects that we could see play in this league in about a month? Also curious on your thoughts of this league even attempting this when nearly full capacity crowds aren't expected to be in arenas. Maybe the Ducks don't even send guys because of that risk. Thanks and have a great show. So what are your thoughts on the ECHL starting up right now? And do you think we'll see any of the Ducks prospects kind of go to them?
I think it's really unlikely just because the prospects that maybe the Ducks would send, they've already had a bunch of AHL experience. And so it doesn't really make sense for them to go play in this lower league with potential health risks just to get, reps. I think that there's really no player on the Ducks roster. Maybe some of the AHL guys,
Maybe
like
Antoine Morand.
yeah, Moran,
Maybe.
Kopaka, these kind of just lower tier prospects. But, for the Max Comtois, the Max Jones, Sam Steeles, I just don't see it. It just doesn't really make sense to do that because they've already, like Sam Steeles already played a bunch of games in the NHL. Max Jones has played a bunch in the AHL. So I don't really know what the benefit would be to send them across the country away from kind of the ecosystem of your training facility and your coaches just to get some game reps in.
Yeah, and
Especially because the season isn't that far away.
well,
If it starts, yeah, so it doesn't make sense.
and it's only a 13 team league right now.
Yeah, I just
I think more likely what's going to happen, because the ECHL, just so everyone knows, it's not filled with guys on contracts with the NHL team. There are guys that are simply on ECHL contracts in the ECHL.
Yeah,
so I would probably expect that majority of the players playing in the ECHL right now as part of this, because like I said, it's 13 teams, and I believe the ECHL is typically, isn't it around 30?
Yeah, well, they're doing it for the ECHL guys. They're doing it
Exactly.
so that those guys have jobs.
Exactly. And so that's the main reason. As for them, my opinion, do what you got to do to make your money. The players need to get paid, so it's probably going to be nice, but who knows with how things are going, how this will work long term, if they're going to get enough gate revenue from it, with obviously these minor league teams, their only income really being gate revenue. So who knows how it's going to end up working out for them. I guess we'll wait and see. Similar thing with like the QMJHL happening. So I we'll have to wait and see, but I would not be comfortable as a Ducks fan with the Ducks sending players to this, because I guarantee you the travel's probably not going to be fantastic. The amenities that are given to them are probably not going to be amazing. So it's mainly going to be there for ECHL players.
Well, that's just my whole point, is just I don't know what player would really benefit from going to that right now.
Yep.
If you look at the Ducks roster and the non-roster players specifically, a lot of those guys are pretty much set in stone, either AHLers or NHL hopefuls. So, like Sam Carrick, for example, is a really good AHLer. Why would he get an assignment to the ECHL, right? It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. And okay, so moving on. Next question that we got is from Kin Knight, who emailed me, and also anyone out there. My email is in my Twitter handle. If you want to email stuff, I'm more than happy to take that, respond, anything like that. Or if you want to do it to the Crash the Pond, jake@crashthepond.com, you can do that also. Either of those work. But he sent us an email saying, hope you and your family are all safe and well. This was sent on Friday, so on a Friday. As a pretty hardcore Ducks fan and someone who enjoys playing Armchair GM, here's a few questions I would love to get you and Felix's take on in one of the next podcasts. So his first question was, the Ducks will have a lot of cap room in a flat cap era in the 21-22 season. What high-end players might they chase in a big trade next summer? Marner and Eichel's name have started to be thrown around. Any other quality first-liners in the league with a cash-strapped team that might be forced into a big-name trade? So I actually hadn't fully thought that far ahead yet, honestly, into next summer. I know that the Ducks have a bunch of cap space, but I think that's a very interesting point, that not necessarily going after a free agent, like a Taylor Hall, for instance, that will be in his late 20s, early 30s, in that range, and you're going to overpay them for however many years, and they're not going to perform at the end of their contract like they should. Instead, making a trade for a guy like Marner, who may be available, same thing with Nylander, and next summer is the time that the Ducks could really pull off that trade. So what are your thoughts, first off, on potentially a Marner? I don't think Eichel's getting moved. I don't think there's any way that's happening. My personal opinion. But Marner or someone of that ilk, and the Ducks trying to pursue that.
I just think it's really hard to answer that question right now, because a lot of what the Ducks, in my mind, a lot of what they're going to do next summer depends on how next season goes. If the Ducks can show next season that they are close to being a playoff contender, or that they even make the playoffs, if they're anywhere in that realm, then I could see them, potentially swinging big or going out and spending money on the free agent market. But if next season is kind of more of the same, just another rebuilding year, inching along, very slow incremental process, I just don't know if they're going to even attempt something like that. So for me personally, I think, yes, if you can make If it were up to me, I would be, with the additional cap space, would be trying to flip for a guy like a Marner or an Eichel, right? Just some big name on a cash strapped team, sure. But I think even if it were me, and the way the Ducks look at it currently, I really just think you kind of have to wait and see how next season goes, because there is a lot. Next season is almost completely an unknown in my mind. We just don't know what this team's going to look like. And so that is going to, and you don't want to be reactionary, but I think with this Ducks team, you kind of have to be, because they haven't really built a sample to give you any faith that they should be going out and making those kind of moves. If anything, if anything, they could go deeper into a teardown after next season if things really go poorly. So we will have to see. I'm sorry I can't give you kind of a sexier answer, but that is truly what I believe right now.
Yeah. Fair enough. Crap. I just timed out Bonnie as a joke, and now it timed her out for 600 seconds. So sorry, Bonnie. I'll try to find a way to fix that for you.
So is that 10 minutes?
Yeah. So, Bonnie, you're timed out for 10 minutes. I'll see if I can fix that in a minute. But here, let me get you into the next question. What do you think that Ryan Getzlaf will re-sign for next season?
So that's a tough one, because I'm not really a cap guru, but I would say that your guess of 2 years, so this is Ken's guess of 2 years for 8 or 9 million, 4 to 4.5 AAV, that could make sense. But if we look at, it always comes back to Joe Thornton, right? When we talk about Ryan Getzlaf, and Joe Thornton has gotten pretty rich AAVs just on shorter term. And I think if I were Getzlaf's agent, I would probably point to that and say these are comparable players, age-wise, production, role, and so we should be getting that kind of money. So I could see him coming back for maybe a year, 6 million, maybe upwards of that. I don't think it would make sense for him to do 2 years at 4 to 4.5, because it's such a big pay cut. And I think he can get more than that, even if it's 2 years. He could do 2 for 6 a year, for example. So I don't think it'll go that low. I think your guess is kind of in the right ballpark, just kind of where your head's at. But I would say he'll get a higher AAV, and he might go year over year instead of extending it out to 2 years, which makes sense, because for Getzlaf, he's had really tough injuries the last, not last season, but the seasons before. And so this season I think is kind of a fresh start for him. And let's see how he performs before, even for himself. So let's see for himself how he does, to kind of know what kind of contract he's fetching. Maybe if he's still injury riddled, maybe if those issues come back, maybe if he has a down year, maybe you do shoot for a little longer term just to have that security. But we'll see with Getzlaf. It'll be interesting. So maybe he doesn't come back to the Ducks.
I think it's going to be less. I could see it being 2 years. I could see the total amount being 4 or 5 million.
No.
You don't think so?
Look at what Joe Thornton has made at this stage in his career.
I'm also basing this based off of what we saw like Teemu Selanne make in later years of his career.
Yeah, but it's
a little different. It's a little different. So who knows? That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Maybe the Ducks try to get Getzlaf to take this big pay cut. Because if we look, so the comparable I'll use is Joe Thornton, the first year out of his his last real multi-year deal. So this was a 35+ contract, which Getzlaf would be. He signed to 1 year, $8 million. Now, of course, it's not a perfect apples to apples, but I would point to that and say he could potentially make up to that. After that, there was a drop off. His following contract was 1 year for $5 million, and now he's on a 1 year deal for $2 million. So I just don't see him getting that low in terms of AAV. There's just a precedent that's really obvious that he could go to.
Yeah, we'll see. I think, you brought up the good point. Who knows if he even resigns? And I think that's a fair point. I think he will.
Retires.
Maybe
he retires.
Maybe.
But
so
I think he comes back. If he like the thing is, what you and Ken are both saying is fine. Like I could see that happening, but I think he could just get more, especially if he has a good season next year, or even like an okay season.
Yeah. So we got a couple more from him. Who is the breakout offensive player for the Ducks in the 21 season? Zegras, Steele, Terry, or someone else?
Why don't you go first here?
I think it's going to be Trevor Zegras. I think he may be up and down this upcoming season. He may not have the full breakout. I think we'll see in the 21-22 season his full potential start to come through, and I think we'll see him start to take that mantle. So I'm going to say Trevor Zegras will have a breakout because I think he just has the highest potential. So I think you're banking on the guy with the highest potential have the biggest breakout.
Interesting. I mean, thank you for gifting me this pick. I really do appreciate it. But I would be very confident saying Troy Terry will have his quote unquote breakout offensive season.
Oh,
with
Troy Terry's breaking
he's-
out this year.
Well, he said for
The 21 season.
Oh, okay. Well,
I guess there is some confusion because which season's 21? Because
yeah,
this upcoming season may technically be it will start in 2021.
He's asking about next season.
If it's next season, so the actual 21 season, I would agree, Troy Terry. If it's the 21-22 season, then it's going to be Zegras.
The 21 season could only be 2020, 2021. And actually next season will only be 21.
Yeah, that's my point. That's what I was saying is that in my head, I keep thinking of it as 2020, 2021.
If you were referring to 2 years from now, you would have to include 2022 in the description.
Fair enough.
So, ouch. Big mistake. Big L for you.
Yeah, fair enough. Go on. Keep go ahead and spread the good word of Troy Terry.
I mean, I just look at Troy Terry and I just think there's such a strong case you can make because he has so many good numbers, right? That's just a very blanket statement, but he has good underlying numbers, right? He drives play. He's a good defensive player. I think when you peel back and you look at the micro stats, micro stats aren't necessarily predictive. We don't really know how well they kind of translate year over year. But that being said, Troy Terry does have a strong impact at the macro level, or at least a good impact, especially as a younger player. He does get shots on net. But when you look at how he does it, right, he's a good puck carrier, exiting his own zone, entering the opposition zone. He's really good at setting up his teammates, both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. And he does look for his shot, I think, more now than he did before. So you kind of combine both what we see when we watch Troy Terry and the different sets of numbers. And I just think that there's just such a ground.
Sorry, folks. We've lost Felix real quick. We'll get him right back. Felix, can you hear me still? You there?
Can you? Yeah, there was. Yeah. I got an error in my mic. Hold on a second.
All good. So, everyone out there, hope you're having a good night. Hope you're having a good day. Hope your weekend's great. Hope Thanksgiving is looking like it's going to be as nice as we can all have. Hope you have some turkey planned for you. So, yeah.
Okay.
I have a visitor right now.
There might be issues in the audio file. But
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Weird.
It's an interface error. Anyway.
Gingerwell said he could feel that you were just about to make a great point. Is that a sign that Troy Terry might be cursed?
I was just gonna say I could see him hitting close to 50 points. I have this confidence in him that he can do it, get to 40, 50. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but when I'm usually this confident in a player, it usually happens. So
Daniel Sprong?
Daniel Sprong did everything that Daniel Sprong did everything he could have.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
And Dallas Eakins doesn't know how to evaluate offensive talent. So, that's not my fault. But I mean, the one that really, the last kind of quote-unquote analytics darling that I picked up on and got really bullish on was Ondrej Kase when they first called him up. And he just did everything so well. And, I mean, that's what he's turned into. He's turned into a decent kind of mid-tier offensive producer, and his underlying metrics are still really strong. I mean, and so I get that. I think to me, Troy Terry is kind of a less physical, but more cerebral version of Ondrej Kase.
Yes, and I think he's a little bit... Kase was very good at generating shots. He was very good along the boards. I think Terry's a little bit better in terms of rushing the puck up the ice and being creative with the puck on his stick. And that's not saying Kasha wasn't creative with the puck on his stick, but I think Terry has a little bit more of that.
If you look at Andre Kasha's shot profile, if you look at the micro stats from the years where he was on the Ducks, the micro stats actually kind of bore out what I think a lot of people critiqued him of is that even though he has these strong, shot metrics, strong macro level data, his shots weren't necessarily from high danger areas, or they were kind of one and done shots, right? That not necessarily threatening. And I think with Troy Terry, he is better at getting into the middle of the ice and either getting his own shot off or dishing off to a teammate, creating that space for them. So I just think his hockey sense is higher in the offensive zone than Andre Kasha, but he still does possess some of those physical tools that can get him those opportunities.
Yeah. So, and then the final question that came from Kin is, with the logjam of middling prospects on the blue line, do you think someone gets moved this season? Because there is a logjam. You got Mahura, you got Gooley, you got Juice, you've got Larson, you've got Koran, and you added, it's hard to call a 30-year-old a prospect, but he is in some ways. And his prediction is that 2 or 3 of these guys get moved during the season. Do you think that any of those guys get moved?
2 or 3 is a lot. But I don't disagree with the notion that, some of these guys are going to get shipped off because there's too much of a logjam, and some of them are capable of playing NHL minutes, especially when you consider the fact that the Ducks drafted so many defensemen in the 2020 draft. So they have guys coming up as well from the 2019 draft. So I wouldn't be shocked if, they did offload some of these guys. I mean, you could argue that Brendan Gooley should be in Jacob Larson's spot. He should be kind of more of the go-to third pairing guy, despite his struggles. But I could see him getting moved. I could see Jacob Larson getting moved. All those names are plausible for sure.
Yeah, I think this will make Bonnie very happy in our Twitch chat. I think Larson potentially gets moved for nothing, basically, which will be awful. Awful asset management, but that's so typical Bob Murray, is to move a guy with no value.
As long as Dallas Eakins is there, Jacob Larson is guaranteed third pairing minutes. It's just, he's not going anywhere.
I think one of those guys potentially might be moved. I can't see Mahura getting moved. That wouldn't make any sense.
I could see Gooley. Gooley's probably the guy.
Yeah, I think Gooley, maybe he gets thrown in because I think he still might have some shine to him as a prospect where someone may want him in a way and he'll have value for them. They haven't completely
tanked his value.
I could see Larson going on waivers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a likely scenario here, and he's not moved, but he's picked. And I think if Larson goes on waivers, I think someone claims him.
Do you think so?
I think so. He's still a guy that's a first rounder, still keeps that shine for a little bit.
Yeah, and look, he's still 23. Like, there's still time for him to become a decent NHL, just an average NHL defenseman. I'm not completely out on the rest of his career, but it's pretty obvious that his ceiling is nowhere near what we thought it would be when he got drafted, or even the seasons after that. So
yeah. And then, okay, so one more question that we got from Ginger Wolf. It came in a little bit ago, and Ginger Wolf's in our Twitch chat, so wanted to get to it. What are the odds the Ducks regret trading Sprong and Kasha, considering this is supposedly a win-now season? I don't think they regret it at all, seeing as it's so recent. I think that was a Bob Murray decision, and he thinks he made the team better for the now by making those trades.
So, well, I just wanted to point out that in the end of Ken's email,
quote-unquote, win now?
He had some nice words. He said, "Hope you're enjoying your off season. My son plays in the ADH SHL and finally has trials this weekend. Fingers crossed they have a season this year. Be healthy and enjoy your weekend." So I guess by now the tryouts have already happened. So Ken, hoping that your son had successful tryouts. Hope he makes the team. Hope he lights it up. And wishing you all the best there. Yep. Now, regarding Daniel Sprong and Andre Kasha, I don't think that I think that they should regret it, because those players do make them better in the now and in the future, because they're both, on the younger side. But the Ducks clearly didn't value Andre Kasha enough to keep him around, and they didn't value Daniel Sprong to even really give him a chance in the NHL. So I don't think that they will regret it. And you could make a case that they shouldn't regret trading Andre Kasha, because David Backes with the additional rest, could come back and be a decent depth center. And then Jakob Perreault, who they drafted with that pick, could end up being much better than Andre Kasha in the NHL. So not necessarily a bad trade there, but yeah, for the now does make them weaker. So
yes, I
think it's a fine, like the more I've thought about that trade, it's kind of been a winding road, but I'm not necessarily as down on it now as I was maybe even a couple months ago. As far as with Daniel Sprong, I mean, I don't know how they could even regret it because they never even played him. So don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask Bob Murray, I don't think he would regret either of them because he'd look at it as he got Christian Juice, who's going to be playing. He traded Kasha, he got Perreault, and he got David Backes. And he may actually view David Backes as more of a plus for this roster than Andre Kasha is, because he may view David Backes as a guy that brings veteran experience, something that he probably thinks the team is lacking, even seeing as he... there were many there was that interview where he thought the kids were running the room on Dallas Eakins, if you recall. And so he may think that gives them the leadership in their win. As we've mentioned, this is not that young of a team.
The thing with David Backes, though, is he does at least bring something to the roster. He's a really good defensive center. He doesn't really do much else, but he does make this team, he does bring something to this team. I don't think he's just like a warm body. He's not Derek Grant.
Yeah, he's better than Grant.
He is better than Derek Grant. And that might be a bit harsh on Derek Grant, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Is it harsh?
The thing with Derek Grant is he legitimately doesn't do anything outside of the penalty kill. He's a good penalty killer.
Outside of the penalty kill and the couple of breakaways that he gets.
Yeah. I mean, he's a really good penalty killer, but again, at even strength where the majority of the game is played, he just doesn't really do anything.
Yep. All right. So, I think that's all of the questions. So, now that we've gotten through that, you want to jump into the topic that you had for us today?
You've been putting this one off.
I have been.
I'm glad you admit it, though.
I mean,
that gives me some peace, some inner peace. Did
I ever say I wasn't?
Well, you never explicitly said that, but you're whatever. Let's get on with the show here. So we figured it might be kind of fun, depending on who you ask, since this Duck season was not what you would have hoped it to be, to just look back on the individual players on the roster and give them letter grades, just evaluate them and see kind of how we will look back. And it's just going to be the guys currently on the team or still on the team. So we're not going to go back and look at players that were traded away. That wouldn't really make a ton of sense. Although it'd be kind of fun to have an excuse to look at Daniel Sprong's stats, but we can't do that. Let's start with Ryan Getzlaf. Should we start there? We're just going to go down the list on the cap friendly page. And
sure.
We'll try to make this, somewhat expeditious. Ryan Getzlaf. So last year played in a bunch of games. I mean, I think he only missed one game, played 69 games. Nice. And he had 42 points, 13 goals, and 29 assists. Was not good defensively. There's no other way to put it, but kind of reclaimed a little bit of that offensive touch and was not great on the power play, but was good at dishing the puck. His assist numbers were good. So how would you grade Ryan Getzlaf's season in 2019-20?
I mean, honestly, I probably would give it B-, C+. I think somewhere in that range. I mean,
why so low?
Now up on the screen, you can now see his RAPM for last year. And a big reason is just defensively not good. I mean, he drove play towards the other team's net. He obviously had a pretty big fall off in terms of his production for last year, but I think the production fall off from him is a pretty big reason, the defensive issues that came up. I think it was just a subpar year. And now granted, part of this is due to expectation. When you hear Ryan Getzlaf, you think about the elite playmaker that he is. And I mean, this is a fall off that is expected. It's an age related decline. And that's expected as a guy starts to enter his mid to late 30s. And so maybe in that context, maybe you can elevate this to B season. But I just think for what you expect from Ryan Getzlaf, it was a subpar season. It was subpar from that.
So I would more lean towards B,
Okay.
B minus B, because what you have to remember is that Ryan Getzlaf was an elite level center up until the 18-19 season, and then he had this catastrophic season like the rest of the team where he had these back spasms that he had to go see a specialist for. He had just these nagging injuries, and apparently the back spasms started the year prior, and he had to get on this, core strengthening program in the offseason. So he's coming back from a pretty tough situation, especially at that age. And I do think that within that context, where the expectations probably should have been much lower, I think he did well. I mean, he's clearly not, at least right now, he is not the elite center that we've seen in the past. But I think he's still the things that you really know him for, the offense and the passing, he still does those things, not to the same degree, but he still does them at a good rate. And so I'd probably land on B minus because he's just so. I mean, his defensive game has taken such a backseat in the last couple of years, so you can't let him off the hook there. But I still do think that he's a contributing member of the roster. It's just, this is what happens. I mean, like you said, with age, right? I mean, you're in your mid-30s, right? You just don't know what you're going to get season to season.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look right now. I wanted to look up what his goals above replacement would have been last year. I'm slightly struggling to find him actually though on this list. Let's see. So he was negative 2.1 goals above replacement. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where a lot of this is coming from, and it's mainly driven by his defense. He was negative 3.5 even strength defense. So he was slightly below replacement level simply due to his own zone play last year. And so to me, that's where I'm kind of coming at this from, is looking at some of these numbers, and you factor that in with his production.
I'm looking at them too.
Yep. No, fair. So I think anywhere from C minus to B is fair for Getzlaf.
C minus,
or sorry, not C minus. I meant C plus.
See, yeah, I think C plus to B, any of those are fine. I would just skew a little higher, but I can understand if you want to ding him a bit more for the defensive play. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move down the list. Adam Henrique. So I'll go first on this one. I'd be pretty confident giving Adam Henrique an A minus.
I would.
Straight A might be acceptable too, but let's just kind of dive into his profile. He was above average in pretty much every respect. Play driving, individual offense. He just did everything pretty much to a good degree, to a good level, and he was arguably the Ducks' best forward. So I don't know how you could really grade him any lower than that range.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at wins or goals above replacement, he was at 5.7, second on the team last year for that in terms of goals above replacement. He led the team in points at 43 points, led the team in goals at 26 goals. It's hard to give him anything. I mean, maybe you could even push it to an A minus. I mean, push it to an A. Maybe you give it a B plus because the fact that, yes, he was the leading point getter on the team, but it was still only 43 points. Like, it's not a huge amount, but yeah. I think for what you expect from Adam Henrique, this was a A minus to A season. This is kind of the best case scenario for what you would expect from Adam Henrique.
And he is 30, so in theory, this should be one of his peak years production-wise, or kind of at the tail end of that. And so maybe you ding him a little bit because he wasn't necessarily blowing the doors off. But this is kind of who he is. He gets goals. He's really not much of a setup man, and I don't know. This is just kind of the player that we've become accustomed to at this point.
Yep.
So, you're sorry. What grade did you give him?
I'd say an A minus. I think you're right on there.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say B plus, but let's give him an A minus. Let's be positive for a change, because some people accuse us of not being so positive.
Do they?
Looking at you, Bonnie.
Oh, okay, yeah, definitely Bonnie.
Jakob Silfverberg. So looking at Silfverberg, I'll just point out the box score stats just for everybody at home. 66 games played, so he did miss a few games, and he scored 21 goals despite that. And so playing 7 less games than the year before, he had only 3 less goals. Good for 39 points. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, he was one of the Ducks' better defensive forwards, and he was really good just from a kind of individual perspective, offensively, defensively, much like everyone else on the Ducks, wasn't really good on special teams, but was a good offensive producer and
Well,
kind of did what you expect from Jakob Silfverberg, I would say.
It's funny you mentioned that about special team because as we go through these players, I'm throwing up the RAPM charts for a little bit on the screen for each of them. And he's actually a player, if you look at expected goals for and Corsi for per 60, so chances and shots, he was one of the best on the Ducks in terms of that. It's just it didn't lead itself to actual production on the power play.
Yeah, and that's why he gets dinged in the goals above replacement for power play.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
because it's a descriptive stat.
Correct. And so I think he's an A. I think he's a very solid A. He was the best Duck in terms of goals above replacement. He was one of the best Ducks in terms of point production. He was solid in his own zone, solid in the offensive zone. You knew what you were getting from him on the ice. I think this is the best case scenario for what you would get from Jakob Silfverberg in a season. So to me, it's an A.
Can we grade David Backes?
No.
I feel like he's a no grade.
Yeah,
because
you can't grade him.
Okay, this might be we might differ on this. I don't know. I'm actually not sure. Rickard Rakell. So Rickard Rakell last season, 65 games played, put up 42 points. Only 1 point less than the year prior, and playing in 4 less games, 15 goals, 27 assists, and looking at his stats, a strong offensive player, a strong play driver into the offensive zone, but defensively just took I don't even know if it's a step back, just was not good at all, but had good individual metrics. So where do you land on Rickard Rakell in his age 26-27 season?
For Rickard Rakell, I'd probably land in the B to B plus range, mainly because the production wasn't there. And now, granted, I'm someone who will look at Rickard Rakell and tell you that production isn't there, not necessarily at a fault of his own. He's putting up really good stats. He's putting up really good numbers in terms of shot metrics and things like that. He led the Ducks in individual expected goals last season, and it was just simply kind of a little bit of poor luck that led him to be under 15 or at 15 goals as compared to 20 plus goals. I think where you can give a knock on him is defensively, and I think that's where I would come down into the B range. I think if we were only looking at offense on him, and so up on the screen once again is his RAPM, and you'll see defensively kind of bled some shot attempts against, and this makes sense that him and Getzlaf are fairly similar in that range, seeing as they were on the ice together a fair amount. But if we were purely going offense, I'm actually one that would grade Rickard Rakell as an A. I think that last year wasn't as bad of a season as everyone makes it out to be. It's like I said, he scored 15 goals when he probably should have scored 20 plus. If that exact season plays out again, he could have been a 30 goal season.
I just think that the issue with Rickard Rakell is that he's not really a true first liner.
No,
and so.
Well, it's all about expectations. I think everyone got this thought in their head when he scored 30 goals that was going to be him every year, when in reality, he probably outproduced a fair amount that year. And if you look at some numbers, and I actually think I did an article on this on the website, basically right when we launched Crash the Pond, that looked at Rickard Rakell's numbers, and this past year may have been his best season as a Duck, if you look at his individual production. And it's just simply the pucks didn't go in, and it's a mixture of that and a mixture of the fact that Ryan Getzlaf have fallen off. But from an individual perspective, last season may have been his best season he's had offensively. Defensively, obviously not so great, and that's why I'd probably bring this down to B or B+.
Yeah, well, you're talking from like a play driving kind of underlying perspective.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, if you look at Rickard Rakell's WAR timeline, so just in terms of his percentile rank, so last season, in terms of overall wins above replacement, he was 78th percentile, and that was after a down year where he went in 17-18 from 86th percentile down to 64th. So he had a pretty big bounce back last season. It wasn't his best season to date from that perspective, but I just think something happened to the Anaheim Ducks in 18-19, and I can't imagine what it would be, but everyone had a really bad year in 18-19.
Who was the coach? Who's the coach?
I can't. I just, I can't imagine that, guys may have thought, is it really worth going 100% this year with this just kind of, let's just call him less than optimal, less than ideal coach. Yes. So, because Ryan Getzlaf did the same thing, big drop. Now, he had other reasons, and it was a more severe drop. But with Rickard Rakell, in an age 25 season, which was what his 18-19 year was, you don't really expect him to dip, right? You expect him to hold at the very least. And so I think that if we want to talk about breakout candidates for next year, it wouldn't really count since Rickard Rakell is kind of an established member of this team. But I could see him having another year where he gets back up to where he was, 3 years ago.
You know what's going to be frustrating?
Mm-hmm. Tell me.
So throughout interviews, Bob Maria said Rickard Rakell has really looked at his game, really looked into what he did wrong this past year, really has worked on his shot and worked on a lot of different things this offseason and put in the hard work. And it is somewhat frustrating to me that the narrative that will surround Rickard Rakell is he put in the work in the offseason and all of this different stuff and did the things they didn't do previously and completely negate the fact that he was good last year. And it's just, if he would have continued playing like that, he would have been fine. It's just, that narrative is going to bug the living hell out of me.
If he was studying his defensive game, then yes, there's a lot to fix there. So if he's better next year in all three zones, then yeah, I think you could say that it's about this offseason. But yeah, I agree with you that from an offensive perspective, I don't know how much he can really do more of.
Yeah.
In so area.
You know that if he ends up scoring 25 to 30 goals, the narrative is going to be he worked harder in the offseason, he
watched tape.
Yeah, and it's like, no, this is exactly how he played last year, and it's just the pucks are going in and the narrative swaps on shooting percentage. It's funny how that works.
The weird thing with Rickard Rakell is that when you look at some of the tracking data from Corey Schneider, he's not really a high event player. He's just kind of a guy who weaves in and out.
Yep.
And when he gets his opportunities, he's just so lethal.
Yeah.
And maybe part of, you hear guys like, skill coaches like Darryl Belfry and Jack Hand talking about this, but maybe he needs to become more involved, get more puck touches, get the puck on his stick earlier in the game so that he doesn't have to rely on that kind of one or two devastating opportunities, right? I think that maybe that's something he'll look at. Patrick Kane has talked about, taking that approach. So we'll see. Okay. Derek Grant. So I'm skipping Danton Heinen and Sonny Milano. I know that people might want to hear us talk about them, but they barely played.
Yeah, not enough sample size.
I think that they were okay in the games that they did play, just to give you kind of a quick synopsis. I think they were okay, but
you'd probably give Milano an A. You probably give Heinen like a C.
Yeah,
but it's such a small sample size. It's so hard to judge them.
Tiny sample. Let's talk about Derek Grant because we haven't talked about him enough. 14 goals in 49 games for 20 points. Got him traded to Philly at the deadline for, what was it, a fifth rounder? One of the two.
Yeah, something like that.
It wasn't a third, I don't think. So Derek Grant, we've already made the case so many times, but he had a really good year from a shooting perspective. He was a good penalty killer. He got breakaway. He actually does seem to get breakaways in the penalty kill often.
Yeah.
That's a thing that he does, that he just finds a way to do. So we'll give him that. But at 5-on-5, the Ducks just get so brutally outplayed when he's out there. And look, it might not necessarily all be on him. I would imagine playing with Nick Deslauriers doesn't help a ton.
Although Nick Deslauriers got better away from Derek Grant.
Yeah, but the point is, overall, there's just no way to really spin his results on ice and say that, it's someone else's fault. They were just bad. Yeah. And they have been bad for pretty much his entire career. So how would you grade that?
So now up on the screen is the RAPM for Derek Grant last year. And now, granted, this excludes penalty kill. But you can see, especially defense. Yes, sure. Didn't even mean that, actually. But the defensively, just an absolute disaster. Absolute disaster. So,
but you knew that watching him play too. This isn't just
part of me wants. I think I'll give him a C-. I want to go harder and give D or D+, but I think that you got to get into. I think C- mainly because of the penalty kill and the goals scored. When we're doing an evaluation, we need to actually look at the production and what he did. And so, if that production wasn't there, if his effectiveness on the penalty kill wasn't there, it would be an F. Without a doubt, an F. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, that raises it up into the C-, probably C range, is that goal scoring. But here's the biggest thing, folks, on Derek Grant is last year, Derek Grant shot, 17%.
Mm-hmm.
The likelihood of Derek Grant shooting 17% again is very unlikely. And so Derek Grant probably is going to be in the 5 to 6 goal range next season would be my bet. And Derek Grant in the 5 to 6 goal range with those numbers, that's about a D to D minus.
So, I don't know if he keeps getting breakaways every game. Maybe he hits 10 again. Yeah, I think C minus is just right. Let's give the guy a little credit for what he did, but man, just there was so many holes in his game. Okay, yeah. This is going to be an interesting one. Troy Terry. So we talk a lot about what Troy Terry will be, what he could eventually end up becoming, but if we were just to grade what he did last season, how would you grade Troy Terry? Because he played in 47 games, had 4 goals, 15 points, spent 14 games in the AHL where he had 16 points. So
yeah,
might be too good for that league. I don't know. How would you grade his season?
I mean, I think I've said this before. The Ducks were better with Troy Terry than without him. He had a granted marginally, but still better with him than without him. 0.6 GAR, and the production wasn't there. I'd probably give him about a C. I think a C, maybe C minus is probably about right. You were hoping for more production from him, but I think if you were at the end of the day, we look at C as being average. So I think in the grand scheme of things, Troy Terry being above replacement level, the Ducks being better with him than without him, but him not putting up the production that you would hope, that's probably about an average season for about a 21, 22-year-old. So
Jake, I have some bad news for you. I think I'm taking over your brand.
Are you going higher than me?
I'm going B.
Wow.
I'm going B. And I feel great about it.
I thought you were gonna chastise me for going too high.
No, I'm taking over your brand.
Wow.
I'm invading your brand.
I was trying to be brutally honest for everyone out there to show that I am not biased. So maybe that's where I went harder on it than I should have. So sure, let's go with B. I'm going up to B. You know what? You brought me up to B.
Wow. Okay.
There's my integrity, folks.
Okay. But he was a good defensive forward last year.
Agreed.
Just straight up good. No other, no caveats, no nothing, no asterisks, just good. Now, offensively, he didn't really drive play. He didn't do a whole lot individually, but he was one of the few Ducks players, and I just mean players. It doesn't have to be D or offense, who was actually decent on the power play. Because we talked about Raquel and Getzlaf being so bad. Terry had some decent numbers on the power play, and we talk about his shot creation, his passing. And it's no surprise that he would grade out well in that department. Now, he's got a long way to go production-wise, but I think if you kind of adjust his production, even for his ice time, he grades out okay in terms of primary assists per 60. So I'm giving him a B, and I feel awesome about it.
You know what? I'm going up to B to match you because you know what? You talked me into it. It doesn't take a lot to convince me to go higher on Terry. I was trying to be brutally honest, but you know what? You're right. He is great.
I mean, if we look at the fact, if we stick to the facts, if we stick to the objective measures of his game, there's not a lot to kind of downgrade him. Anyway, so let's talk about Carter Rowney. I mean, all due respect to Carter Rowney, but the excitement level is not quite the same as discussing Terry, prospect versus veteran. Carter Rowney was not as bad as Derek Grant. If you adjust his numbers and try to isolate them individually, shot suppression or expected goal suppression, if we want to be extremely specific, he was actually above replacement level and was a good penalty killer like Derek Grant. Wasn't as much of a sieve defensively as Derek Grant. So I would have him at a C. I think C is kind of about right.
I think C is about right.
He is what he is. He's a fourth liner. He's just a fine fourth liner who's not really going to give you any offense, but he's going to be okay in his own zone. So now you do want to see more of a play driving ability because you're hoping that you're not just getting crushed in those minutes, but I'll give him a C. I think C is appropriate.
One thing we should make clear of, because Bonnie mentioned, because Bonnie, notorious Troy Terry hater, said if you evaluate Terry this way, you must reevaluate everyone else. The thing is, our evaluation of each player on these grading scales is based upon what those players did and what their what the expectation of them was also going into the season. And so I think that's a big thing to factor in here, is that while if you're comparing to players, you obviously would say that, I don't know, Ryan Getzlaf had a significantly better season than Troy Terry. Mm-hmm. But when you're factoring in the expectation for that player,
and that's where
that's where these grades come in, and that's why a player may have had a better season but may not have a better grade, and that's where this is factoring in. I think Carter Rowney probably is a C. I think you're right there.
Maybe
I think
C minus.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He's better than Derek Grant. Doesn't have the production of him. Maybe you put them on the same level as a result of that.
Okay. Next up, we're just going through the fourth line here. Nick Delorier. So Nick Delorier, who, by the way, in 59 games as a fourth liner, had 7 goals, which, when you play single-digit minutes a night, 7 goals is kind of nice. Now, 3 of those came in one game, but the point
forgot about that, honestly.
Well, I was rewatching some clips for something I'm writing, just casually throwing that in there, but the game I was watching was actually the Nick Delorier game. So,
wow.
There you go. Nick Delorier, though, I just want to point out, set a career high last season in penalty minutes. Do you know how many that was?
No. No, I don't.
Hello?
Oh, what happened?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My computer is someone just called me and it popped up on my computer.
Tonight's an adventure.
FaceTime.
Tonight is an
adventure. My God. Okay. Nick Delorier had 92 penalty minutes last year, which was a career high for him. And he's actually played, and he didn't even play 82 games. He played 82 games for the Sabres in 14-15 and got 71 penalty minutes. So we should give him a little credit for that, right?
No. I mean, why?
So here's the interesting thing with Nick Delorier.
I mean,
here's the interesting thing. He actually grades out the best in terms of expected goals against when you isolate for his individual contributions. 77th percentile, which is higher than Rowney, obviously higher than Grant, and individual defense 60th percentile. Now, did nothing offensively. You just forget about him offensively. Individual production, didn't play on special teams, but he wasn't actually terrible in his own zone.
Yeah, he was not. So I would say if we gave Rowney and we gave Grant C minuses, let's give Delorier a C.
No, I gave Rowney a C.
Oh, I thought we agreed that we were going. Okay, fair enough. Well, I think Delorier C or C plus then.
C plus? Now I would go C minus. I think, it's well and good that he was okay in his own zone, but the guy's not adding a ton of value.
No, he's not.
Right?
Anywhere in that C range is fine.
Okay.
That is the exact season that you would expect from Nick Delorier, basically, and exactly what you would expect from Carter Rowney. That is not actually what.
You maligned that trade so hard. One thing I will say about Nick Delorier, he's a fun player to watch. He goes out of his way to crush people well after the puck has changed hands. He drops the mitts, the hat trick game. How can you not love that? But if we're just being very cold and calculating about it, he's not an impactful player.
I'll buy the C minus. Wait, are you defending that trade now?
No, I'm not. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, it was a bad trade. You made it sound like I was wrong for saying that trade was bad. I was just pointing out
that you maligned it. I'm not saying anything beyond that.
Because it was a very bad trade. There's no reason why you should be trading a 4th round pick for Nick Delorier.
How do we feel about Max Jones? Because he is next on our list. So he played in 59 games. He had 8 goals, 12 points, played 8 games in the AHL. You look at his numbers, it's a very bleak picture, in my opinion. Did nothing offensively from an individual perspective. Wasn't good defensively. Didn't contribute on the power play. Was a good penalty killer. We'll give him that. Didn't have a good shooting year. Was okay. And by okay, I mean slightly below average, slightly below replacement in terms of driving play. Wasn't good in his own zone. I think this is going to be my first D range. I don't see I don't see how you can put him in the C range personally.
I guess the only logic behind being in the C range is the fact of what your expectation was for him. And I think that this season was in some ways average. I think his on ice metrics were not.
I mean, I don't know how you even get to C. What is the road to C for him?
He
was a good penalty killer?
The road to C for him is he had all right production, some all right numbers. And the thing is, you weren't expecting him to put up great things. And
he's a first round pick.
Yes, but he is still, what, 21? He was 21 this past year?
He's 22.
Was he? I think he was 21 going into the season, though, right?
So he turned, let's see.
I think he turned 22 in...
He's turning 23 in February.
Yeah.
This coming February.
So he turned 22 in February. So he was 21 to start the season.
Yeah, but he was 21 for like 4 months. Anyway, point being...
He was 21 for...
I get what you're saying, but...
He was 22 for 1 month of the season.
Well, yeah, but that's because it was cut short. But the point being... On the flip side of that, you would expect a player in this age range to start kind of, this should be the ascension period where they're getting better.
I guess.
I mean, he wasn't better. I mean, maybe he was slightly better than the year before, but I don't know.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't hate your
what he did. I'm just grading what he did. I'm not thinking too much about expectations.
I don't hate the D pick, but I will say I'm trying to be positive on it and go with C-, but I think D is in the fair range.
I just don't know if you don't really do anything particularly well at 5-on-5 and you don't contribute your own offense. I mean, he's basically just a different version of Derek Grant. I mean,
he's Derek Grant without the goal scoring.
Yes, and like that's not the place you want to be in.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
Those are dark waters.
I guess the difference is that Derek Grant is in his prime years, whereas Max Jones is still developing, and so I think you hold them to a slightly different standard in that range. And I guess that's where I would find myself in the C range for Max Jones as compared to D. But I mean, now up on the screen you'll see his RAPM chart from the year. Anything offensively, just really bad.
I understand, but yeah,
I'd probably go C-. I think you're completely fair though going into the
Let's
D
go. Range. I don't think I ever. Never mind. I was going to make some bad reference, but let's bring in a little controversy into the show. Sam Steele. This is going to get ugly. This could be the ugliest one so far, because Sam Steele, 30th overall pick, first round pick, and highly touted, had some really productive years in junior. But last season, how would you grade what he did for the Anaheim Ducks?
I mean, if I'm going to be consistent, I would probably put him on par with Max Jones. So if I gave Max Jones a C-, I'd probably hold Sam Steele to that same standard and do a C-. But I'm kind of tempted to put him down a little bit just because being a center, you expect a little bit more out of him. And so I guess my expectations were maybe a little bit higher for him, whether that's fair or not. So I may bring him down to D or D+.
My thing with Mac, the thing. Okay, so here is I'll give you the optimistic reading and the pessimistic reading of his profile. Is that let's start with the pessimism so we can end up on a good note. Pessimistically, he didn't really do anything that well. He wasn't even replacement level in any one metric that we look at. Individual offense, individual defense, on ice, play driving, production. He didn't do anything to that level. But on the flip side, this is the optimistic reading, he also wasn't terrible at 5-on-5. He wasn't awful, right? He wasn't Derek Grant or Max Jones bad in some of those respects. And so that does give you some optimism that he may be trending in the right direction, especially when you consider that he was solidly the team's third line center, and that probably wasn't the role he should have been in. He probably should have been ideally the fourth line center or a third line wing. I think that the Ducks gave him, they put a lot of faith in him. And this is the thing when people like Jake will say that the Ducks haven't given the youngsters enough opportunities. I mean, I would counter and say, look at how they handled Sam Steele last season. I mean, they gave Sam Steele every opportunity. He's the only youngster
Fair.
who didn't go down to the AHL,
Fair.
and he was consistently in the lineup in a significant role. So it didn't work out. It was ugly. I mean, it wasn't great, right? But I'm of two minds here. If I'm just looking at what he did last year, I'd probably give him a C minus. C minus, D plus. You could probably talk me into either. If I'm looking at it from long-term perspective, how does this season make me feel? This season makes me feel much worse than that. Because if you truly are a high-end talent, you should be showing already that you can be that. There should be some evidence of that somewhere, and he didn't show any of that. So I'll set that aside because this conversation is about just grading what they did. But I think on either front, I'm not super confident.
And I think for better or for worse, Sam Steele had higher expectations coming in as after a couple years at post-draft. He had higher expectations than Max Jones did because of the seasons he had in the WHL.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, all right, moving on.
Moving on. I'm surprised you didn't have much more to say on Sam Steele, but
you basically covered it all. I think Sam Steele did not have a great year. I think that he's a guy that, like I said, if I want to apply the logic I did with Max Jones and the fact of he was 21 years old, I believe, coming to the season, there is a whole lot more for him to improve on. But I think that he had higher expectations in that same sense. So I think his season was as poor, in my opinion, as Max Jones was. And so I think with having him having higher expectations, I think that lowers the grade a little bit. Okay,
let's move on to the blue line. And so this will be quicker because the Ducks shuffled out a lot of bodies.
Yep.
Cam Fowler, how do you grade his season?
A.
Okay. Defend.
Big reason, this was Cam Fowler's best season in a Ducks jersey. He was a guy that no matter who he played with, he made that player better. And that's not something you can consistently say throughout Cam Fowler's season. And now up on the screen is his RAPM charts. And you can see defensively, he was just so good last season. And whether he was with Goodbranson, whether he was with Del Zotto, whether I believe he was with Holzer at one point. Basically, any player that he got paired with, they became above 50% in expected goals for percentage. And so this was, and that's what you want out of a player that's making as much as Cam Fowler is. You need him to make players around him better. And that's been one of the complaints that I buy with Fowler, even though I'm a big fan of his, is that he's so partner dependent that he needs a good partner to be better. Whereas last year was the exact opposite. No matter who you put him with, he made that person better, and that's exactly what you want. And Apparition in our Twitch chat throws an A+ if that's an option. I think I agree. I think it could be considered an A+ season. Maybe the only thing that's lacking there is the power play production, but I think when you're looking at a defenseman, you're looking at own zone play and the ability to transition to offense. And I think for what was a pretty bad season for the Ducks, he was one shining light for this team in terms of the play he had in his own zone.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I may have cooled a little bit on Fowler the more I've kind of, studied his stats and watching him play, but he had very good stretches. I mean, he had stretches where he was just excellent. And so you have to give him credit for that, especially with kind of how his season ended injured. So I would probably, in the interest of consistency and rewarding, focusing on what he actually did, I'd probably go A-. I think that he wasn't that great. He wasn't that great in terms of play driving, but he was one of the few Ducks who just wasn't bad. And that has to be worth something, right? And he had really good production. He had 9 goals in 59 games for a D-man. That's great. 20 assists. Was one of the few Ducks who just wasn't just abjectly terrible on the power play, which, again, that's worth something. And the Ducks put him with a bunch of different bodies. They put him with. He turned Eric Goodbranson into an asset, a trade asset.
Yeah, and
for the Ducks.
He also, granted, he played a fair amount with Michael Del Zotto at various points in time.
They did well together.
Michael Del Zotto was a positive goals, but he was better than replacement level last year. And to me, a big portion of that is Cam Fowler. And so that to me, it's not always just his impact on the game; it's his impact on his partners.
Yeah, and if you look at the hashtag micro stats with Cam Fowler, he actually had the highest possession zone exit percentage of any defenseman. So in his overall attempts to get out of the zone, he was the most successful in getting out of the zone with possession of the puck, whether on his own stick or, just his team maintaining possession. And it wasn't even particularly close. He was at 51%, and Hampus Lindholm was the next highest at 40%. So he was really carrying the mail in terms of just breaking the puck out, which is what you'd expect for Cam Fowler, but it's nice to see that kind of put into numbers.
That's been one thing with his game always, if you look at microstats, is he's always been an elite player at breaking the puck out of the zone with possession. He does not get caught when the puck's on his stick. His own zone and turns it over.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to look at it versus in the sense of exits versus turnovers, he was the very best on this team in terms of his ratio of successful exits to failed exits. So
that's a calling card of his for a long time that I think not a lot of people give him enough credit for.
It's something that personally, I mean, and anyone really should value in a defenseman, because that's kind of your role on the ice. I mean, it's to keep the puck out of your own net and also get the puck out of your zone, get it to your forwards.
Yeah.
let them go play.
That's something, even when Fowler's had some bad on ice metrics, that's been something he's always excelled at. And so that's
it's nice to see the overall metrics catch up to that, though.
Yes, agreed. And this was the season for that.
This is the next couple are going to be tough, because I think we've kind of gone back and forth on these guys as the season has gone on in the off season. Hampus Lindholm. So Hampus Lindholm last year, he had 23 points in 56 games, which is actually a pretty big step up pace-wise from the season prior, where he had 28 points in 76 games. So almost the same amount of points in 20 less games. So a good production-wise, a good season for him. And if you look at his on-ice metrics, I mean, he was really good. He was good, defensively. He was fine offensively. Was good on the power play, good on the penalty kill. So where do you land on? And also, I should point out, played some really tough minutes. If you look at quality of competition, he was in the 90th percentile amongst defensemen in the NHL. So
yeah,
he was fed to the wolves by Dallas Eakins.
I think this is where I would say it's all about your expectations. So up on your screen right now is single season for Hampus Lindholm, and I'm about to switch it. This is the RIPM charts at Evolving Hockey, and now I'm about to switch it to multi-season. And so last season was still really good, but it was a bit of a step back. And that's not necessarily saying Lindholm was bad, but he just didn't meet the huge expectations that I think that you have for him defensively. And so it was a slight step back for him. So because of that, I think I would probably go A-, B+ for him. I think he's still one of the best defensemen and potentially the best defenseman on the team. But I think when you look at him and try to give him a letter grade, I think it would be hard to argue that last year was a bit of a step back for him in terms of the previous couple of seasons. And so that's where I think I would go with an A- or B+. I still think that he probably is the best defenseman on this Ducks team. Maybe last year he did not have the best season, but I think he is still the best defenseman on the team.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I think it sounds like you're weighing a bit more the expectations than just what happened.
Yep.
I would be comfortable giving him an A- or B+. I think either or. I'm not really set on either, but he did well. I mean, He was one of the few players in this roster who did really well. So you can't. Would you agree you can't have him lower than B+?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can have him. And Bonnie actually in our Twitch chat said cannot put him at a B though. Has to be a bit higher than that. So
yeah,
I think
that's the thing is, despite, I mean, and this is a credit to what he's done in the past, is that he's been so good that our expectations of him are just so high that a season in which he was arguably maybe the Ducks' best skater, we're looking at him maybe kind of from a point of disappointment. So I think I'll give him an A-. I'll go high on him. I'm gonna go A-.
Yep.
You can disagree all you want. Okay. Let's talk about Josh Manson, because this is a guy who on this podcast we have traded multiple times over in hypothetical trades, and that I think the fans, I don't want to say turned on him last season, but definitely there was a shift, right, where Josh Manson was kind of a darling of the Anaheim fan base for a couple of years, and then I think fans kind of soured on him, and he didn't necessarily do himself favors, with a lot of kind of boneheaded plays. trying to go for the big open ice hit as opposed to just kind of playing a sound positional game. So where do you land on Josh Manson's season last year?
So now up on the screen, single seasons on the screen now for Josh Manson RAPM versus now flipping it to multi-season. So you'll be able to see that if you're watching the video of this. And now I'm going to go away from it. But I think that last season was what we expect from Josh Manson, maybe even a little bit better than what we expect. I think that, yes, you have the issue of kind of the turnovers, and maybe that's why you would bring him down slightly, but I would probably still put him in the B to B plus range. I think it was a solid season for him. He didn't have the goal scoring or the production that you saw from him a couple times in the last couple of seasons, but I mean, he was solid in his own zone. The issue is he only put up 9 points, whereas in the previous season he had 16, and in the one before that he had 37. But maybe it's just those were unrealistically high for him, and I think that he had a solid season. I think that he had a B to B plus season. And real quick, I want to mention this because Bonnie asked us, are we too hard on him with all the talks about the trades? And one thing I want to mention, we've said this a bunch here, but it's worth reiterating. The reason why we say Josh Manson should get traded isn't because he's bad. It's because he's good, actually, and because he can bring value back to this team based upon his age.
Yes.
And so a lot of times when we bring up guys getting moved, that's actually a sign that they're having good seasons for this team, because if a guy's playing poorly or things like that, that means he doesn't have much value. And yes, that player can be traded to get him out to reset the culture, different things like that. But that's not something I really want to speculate on, because that's not going to, or even talk about, because it's not going to bring back value. Like trading Jacob Larson isn't going to bring back value. The way that you get value back is by moving value out. And so that's why we bring up Josh Manson in that conversation so much, is he actually is good and has been good.
I agree. And the thing is, I think that Manson is also a victim of expectations, like we just talked about with Lindholm, where they've been so good in the past that a downtick feels like this drop off. But when you just look at what they actually did, they were still good. They were still really good. I mean, Josh Manson was one of the better defensive defensemen in the NHL last year, still, right? Just purely from a defensive standpoint. So I would have him as a B. I think that, he doesn't really bring you anything offensively anymore. At least he didn't last season, and that has to be a downgrade. But I think he's a very solid B, and I might even go as high as B+. You know what? I'll go B+. Holidays are coming up. Let's keep it jolly. I'll go B+ and Josh Manson.
Fair enough.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is the argument for the Ducks being good next year, is that they have these guys who have had down years.
The funny thing is, the defense for this team is one of the best defenses they've had in the past, 5, 6, 7 years.
Which says a lot.
It's a really
because they've had good ones.
It's a really good defense for this team. And it has good players. And I think that for the first time in a long time, there is not exactly a weak link for this team. Whereas you could look back and you could say, well, Clayton Stoner. You could look back and say, well, Kevin Bieksa. You could look back and say, well, Francois Beaujemais. There's always that 1 weak link that's going to play a significant amount of
career.
Yes,
Later
yes. I definitely could agree with that. Later in his career.
I'm just saving you from the
backlash. The backlash. Yes, later in his career. But that's kind of my point, though, is that there's always been that 1 weak link that's going to play a significant amount of minutes. And I don't know if there's necessarily that when you have a top four of Lindholm, Manson, Fowler, Shattenkirk. And so that is an argument for them being good. I just don't know if the forwards are going to necessarily be good enough.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Okay, I'm going to call it 3 more players to look at, because there's a lot of guys with not enough sample, guys who weren't on the Ducks last year. Let's talk about Jacob Larson. I mean, I'll give him a D.
D.
I'll be kind.
D.
I'll be kind and give him a D.
D.
Bad defensively, bad offensively, bad on special teams, all in cushy third pairing minutes. So, D.
I mean,
next.
D-.
D-? Yeah, I mean, we could just go straight F.
We very much could. Let's just do it straight F. F.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I mean, I wanted to keep it jolly, but you've chosen to make this negative, so shame on you, but whatever. Low grade. We'll just agree low grade. Okay, we've got 2 more people to talk about. because there's a lot of guys that we could talk about, like maybe Lundestrom or Comtois, but I just don't think they played enough to really go in depth on. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Let's talk John Gibson. So this is hard. This is hard.
It's so hard.
Because in my heart of hearts, I truly think that John Gibson is at worst the third best goalie in the NHL. But he had a very poor season, not just by his standards, but well, definitely by his standards, but also just league wide. Was well below what you would expect, and that's not good. I mean, I can you give him anything higher than a D?
I think you could give him a C minus.
Really?
I mean, his numbers were not good. And I think the reason why I'd go in the C to C minus range is he was left out to dry. Now, granted, he's been left out to dry a bunch in the past.
This is the emotional side of you talking.
This is 100%, and I will completely admit to that.
Fair.
And so I think that I'd probably go C minus mainly due to that, but I think you're completely justifiable going in the D range.
I mean, okay, yeah. So if you want to be cold and calculating, John Gibson, if we look at goals saved,
he had a poor season.
I mean, poor is selling it short. I mean, he was one of the, he was well below, kind of what you'd want to see in him, and that's just not what we're accustomed to seeing with John Gibson. Poor season, sure, but I do kind of have time for that emotional way of looking at it, simply because John Gibson has had this insane, unreasonable workload the last, let's call it 2 years. And at a certain point, like you've often said, that catches up to a goalie, an athlete, whoever, but particularly a goaltender, where there's so much strain put on your knees, your hips, your groin. And I just think this was a year where that kind of all came to a head. Now, does that mean that we should just sell out on John Gibson and that he's not the goalie that we saw the years prior to that? No, absolutely not. I think that he had a bad season, but he had so many elite, world-class seasons before that we can't be out on him. But for last season, I'm going to go with a D just because I have to stay true to my methodology.
That's fair.
He wasn't good.
That's fair.
But that being said, we wanted to talk about this, but the NHL, and this just goes to show how reactive people can be. NHL Network, where they do their top 10 positions this time of year or in the offseason, they didn't even have John Gibson in their top 10 goalies, which to me is just like mind-boggling. No matter how down you may be on John Gibson after last year, to say that he's not one of the 10 best goalies in the NHL is just insanity.
Yeah, it is absolute insanity. And now on the screen is actually, for those of you watching the video portion of this, you'll see the list from Twitter, from the NHL Network Twitter. So let's just run through it. First is Andrei Vasilevsky. Second is Tuukka Rask. Third is Connor Hellebuyck. Fourth is Ben Bishop. 5 is Jordan Binnington. 6, Carey Price. 7, Darcy Kemper. 8, Robin Lehner. 9, Jacob Markstrom. 10, Anton Hudobin.
And Carey Price is, and I mean, Carey Price is one of my favorite players of all time. But Carey Price being in that list is purely because of what he did in the playoffs. It has nothing to do with his regular season.
Want to talk about someone being on this list purely for what they did in the playoffs?
Who?
I mean, we can name a bunch. Jordan Binnington, Anton
He wasn't good in the playoffs, though. They pulled him.
No, but my point is 2 playoffs
the
ago.
Playoffs before?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Anton Hudobin?
Pushback on that.
Yeah, and the fact that how is Anton Hudobin on this list?
Anton Hudobin was 10th in GSAX last season.
Yes, I get that, but how is he on the list of top 10 goalies in the league?
I think he deserves to be there. I do. I think he is that good, and he's been that good. Now, you could argue that he doesn't have the workload to be on that list, and that maybe I have time for, but just in terms of his performances, Anton Hudobin's been up there.
Ben Bishop, I have some... I can hear the argument for him being on this list because he had a really damn good season 2 years ago.
Yes. Guess who the only goalie he was behind in GSAX was?
John Gibson.
Exactly. So
yes.
And so why is John Gibson not on the list?
Yes. So well, It's a pretty easy answer. It's the same reason why John Gibson has never won a Vezina Trophy.
Well,
They
playoffs.
and
Actually, I don't even know about that.
Wins.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, the GMs vote on the Vezina, and there's probably looking at wins and
And
GAA.
this is NHL Network, which is kind of in that same line. So, out of these guys, would you put any of these guys over John Gibson?
Hold on. Let me just pull up the list. Sorry. Actually, no. I don't even need to look at it. No.
I'd put
John
one,
Gibson.
I'd put one, potentially one.
Oh,
Potentially.
can I guess who you're gonna say?
Who?
Darcy Kemper.
No. God, no.
Oh, really? I
Why
thought
would
you were a huge Darcy Kemper
No.
stan.
No.
Okay.
The only one that I would potentially put above John Gibson, and now granted, I need to eat crow. This is a guy last season that I was down on, or 2 seasons ago, and he just was so damn good last season. And deserves the praise and should get the praise for how good he was last year and that he could potentially be better than John Gibson, and that's Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah, you do need to eat crow on that because you have bashed.
I'm
that is legitimately the only one I think that you can put ahead of Gibson. Maybe Carey Price.
No,
maybe
no, and not Andre Vasilevsky either.
No, definitely not Vasilevsky.
Not Vasilevsky, not Rask, not Markstrom. Jacob Markstrom's going to be an awful contract in a year or two. Markstrom is an average goalie.
He was good last year.
He's average. He was.
Yeah,
fine.
this list is. I mean, why is Tuukka Rask number 2? I like how we haven't even touched that.
Yeah, I don't even know. Didn't they put out? Let me see if I can find it. CJ texted us. I think there was a fan list that came out that was much closer to what you would want to see from this type of list. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But I believe John Gibson was like 4th on that list.
I mean, I would disagree with that even, but at least he's on the list.
Yeah.
Right? Like, at least he's on the list.
Here we go. It was NHL 21 put out their ranking of top
the ratings.
10, the ratings.
Well, they had number 2.
They had him number 2.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, you could talk me into him being like the 3rd best because he did have such a bad season. But that's really it. Like, that's the lowest I would go on Gibson.
Yeah. And
okay.
And Andre Vasilevsky, here's the thing on him. I get why everyone has him number 1.
Well, because he's a robot. I mean, he looks like a robot, like a goalie robot.
Well, and the fact that he's put up good numbers in Tampa, he's won a cup now, he's constantly been good. It's just you look at underlying numbers and kind of contextual numbers, and they're not as great.
Okay, here's the last player that we need to evaluate. Actually, it's not a player. It's Dallas Eakins. It's the head coach. Because you know what? Head coaches should be evaluated just like players, in my opinion. How would you rate Dallas Eakins' performance this season?
I would probably go C to C minus. I'd say average, maybe slightly below average. He didn't do, and I think that's my feeling on how he was, is that he didn't do anything to make the Ducks better necessarily, but he didn't really make them that much worse last year.
Yeah. I'm kind of 2 minds on Dallas Eakins, and this is a part of me that I try not to tap into too much, but everything that you heard out of that locker room, especially in the beginning of the season, now it kind of died down as the season got so bad, but it sounded like guys were at least enjoying going into work again, that they were enjoying.
That's true.
And I think that there is value in just having a coach who brings that out of players, that they just enjoy the process and enjoy being, NHL players and not dreading, going there. But that only has so much value. I would say overall, the Ducks weren't that good. I don't know how much better he really made them. I will give him credit for giving young players opportunities because I think that that's important. I do downgrade him because the special teams, particularly the power play, was really bad. So overall, I'll give him a C minus. C minus is like, and that's the exact grade I think he should get.
I've said this on Dallas Eakins before, and I'll say it again. This is the put up or shut up season for him because he needs.
Yeah.
This is. I think that you can justify the first season as being feeling.
Isn't he on a 2-year deal?
I don't remember actually off the top of my head, but
I think it's a 2 or 3 year deal.
It's hard to fully judge a coach off of a single season, and so I think that this is now the season where he's had 1 year to figure out the team, figure out the players. Now it's time for him to take the summer. And now, granted, this has been a really long summer, and maybe that's a built-in
Well,
excuse.
did you read the interview he had with Eric Stevens?
I did.
Thoughts? Quick thoughts. Since we're like 2 hours into this.
Yeah, we're a long ways into this. I mean, my thoughts are, it didn't really change anything in terms of my opinion necessarily.
The only thing that stuck out to me is he mentioned he wants the team to play a more aggressive style.
Yeah.
That they were really focused on being kind of just minimizing high danger chances and kind of packing the middle lane. And now he wants them to get more aggressive, which I think I agree with, because when they were aggressive last season, like for example, the Ducks were one of the better teams in terms of recovering dumped in pucks on the forecheck. They were actually one of the better teams on the forecheck. And so they clearly have that bone in their body. And so maybe tapping into that now that you've quote unquote established the details in your own zone, maybe that will help. So what I give Dallas Eakins credit for is that he at least seems to understand, like he doesn't seem out of touch with reality when he talks about his team. You know, when Randy Carlyle talked about his teams, he was capable of being very harsh and actually being correct, but it always seemed like he just had no inkling of how he factored into all of that, or at least he wouldn't say it publicly. At least with Dallas Eakins, I do think that he's very much aware of how much the buck stops with him, and I do appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, agreed.
Okay, well, I think that's it.
Yeah, I guess
I think that's it.
Yeah, the only other things to really talk about are that guess who's top of the Premier League table?
Oh God.
Guess who beat Manchester City yesterday and is now top of the Premier League for the first time since 2014?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware.
Tottenham Hotspur. And then the other thing of note in my world is this is actually a big deal, and it transcends the wrestling world a little bit. The Undertaker officially retired today. They had this really weird send-off in Survivor Series.
Okay.
There you go. Anyone have questions? We never actually hit questions from the Twitch chat.
Let's do a couple. I mean, at most, because it's getting late.
Lewis, if you've got a wrestling question, please put it in there so I can bug Felix a little bit more.
No.
With that, Lewis, it's all on you. But anything from you? 49ers were off this weekend. How's your fantasy football team do?
It's been a shit week sports-wise for me. The Warriors are basically now guaranteed to be a rebuilding team or just trying to make the playoffs with Klay Thompson tearing his Achilles in a workout and being done for the year before the year even starts. So that's depressing. Yeah, just not a lot. My fantasy team sucked, so I'll stay away from those topics. Stay away from them. It's for my own good.
Lewis wants you to talk him off a ledge with the Klay Thompson injury.
Okay, what's the ledge?
The fact that he's on the ledge because of that.
I mean, it can go one of two ways. The Warriors will either decide, well, actually, we already know what they're doing. They're going to do whatever they can to just make the playoffs now. They're just trying to salvage whatever they can out of Steph and Draymond. I personally would not do that. I would just blow the whole thing up. As much as it pains me to say, they're not going to be championship contenders without Klay, and they don't really have a path to getting another piece like him. I mean, or the other door is you trade Klay, just mercilessly trade Klay, and I would even consider trading him for James Harden, who wants out of Houston, and just form another super team. But you're going to burn some bridges along the way if you do that, both with the fans. Both with Klay Thompson and his circle. But if this is all about being good and winning championships, then you should probably be looking to trade Klay Thompson, because he just tore his ACL right before, a year before tearing his Achilles. Like, he's not going to be ever the same. It's just not going to happen. So you have to move on from that, but they're not going to do that. I think the approach that they're taking right now is probably the least optimal one. Like, you either swing big and just try to get to, contender status, or you just blow the whole thing up. But it just sounds like they're just trying to, get to the 5th seed or whatever. And I don't know if I love that.
There was your Warriors minute with Felix. So we got 2 questions. Let's hit these quick. Who do you think the future captain is of the Ducks?
Cam Fowler.
See, I would have gone Cam Fowler for a long time. I don't know if Fowler's still going to be with this team when Getzlaf retires.
Well,
I think it's going to be Trevor Seagrass.
No, I don't know.
You see,
I think there's going to be kind of a transitional.
Maybe
they're a transitional captain. I don't think it'll go straight from Getzlaf to a very young player. Maybe they do that, but I could see maybe like Lindholm getting it. I mean, because he's kind of in that age range. I mean, his contract status might leave some questions, but I could see maybe Lindholm actually.
Yeah. And Bionic Chris asked, do the Ducks get another top 10 pick next year?
Oh, is this just gun to my head?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go, everyone. Felix put it in writing. Remember that. Remember that. You put it in podcast form right now, where everyone can come back to this in the future, hold it against you, and
if I'm wrong, like, great. I mean, it benefits our show. It makes a lot of people that we care about happy. So I mean, it's not a bad thing, but there's a lot of downside risk with this team, and right now that's clouding my view.
Yep. So I think that's gonna do it for tonight's show.
Wow.
2 hours. We just passed the 2 hour mark.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks everybody for listening. I mean, if you're still listening right now, I mean, even more credit to you for making it through the Undertaker's retirement story.
I barely talked about that as compared to your Warrior segment. I gave you that.
Well, the Warriors thing, I mean, that team is my heart and soul. So,
and the Undertaker is a legend of the wrestling industry, and he is now retired in one of the weirdest segments of all time, in my opinion. Didn't even go out with a match. Didn't go out with a match.
It's all well and good. But thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I mean, it's that's what this week is about, right? Hope. Anyway, have a great Thanksgiving. Do the right thing is what I'll say. Couple different ways that you can support the show, though. First off, I mean, probably the one that helps us, maybe not the most, but definitely helps things kind of keep running, is checking out our Patreon page. So patreon.com/crashthepond. You have 2 tiers of support, which you can choose. So for $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat. Once the season comes back, which, hey, is coming up, we're going to do we do live in-game chats. So we'll just go back and forth, kind of like, you have like group chats with your friends, right, where you talk about certain topics. Like some people have their fantasy football chats. Well, that's kind of what this is for the Ducks. This is your Ducks chat, and you can converse with like-minded people, diehard fans. So that's for $1 a month.
Maybe we look into doing some new things with it. I think you and I should talk about some things that I have in mind to add to the Patreon for this upcoming season.
Maybe if we hit a certain number of patrons, we'll upgrade it. We'll see, or we'll work on that. $5 a month, you get access to 2 bonus episodes. So we go in depth on Ducks related topics, league-wide topics, crazy topics, random topics. It's whatever you guys really want. We solicit topics in the Discord chat before recording, and then we go off on our own tangents as well. So that's for $5 a month. The people that do listen to those episodes, the few that I know, they really seem to enjoy them. So I think that if you enjoy kind of the banter, the lighter side of this show, you will definitely enjoy the bonus episodes. Now, another way that you can support us, which is completely free, just search for the podcast on the Apple Podcasts app, type in Crash the Pond. You can simply leave us a 5-star rating. It takes half a second, and that really helps. Or you can take it another step up and leave us a review. Those are awesome. We love hearing from you guys. They really do benefit us. Not only emotionally, but, for example, potential sponsors look at that, right? And that's going to help us keep this show going and make it bigger and better. So all these different things that you guys do, that's helping us just kind of make this an even better product for you. When we do record the show, actually, Jake, did you want to talk about the annual subscription for Patreon?
Yeah, so we've mentioned this a couple times now, but one of the things with Patreon is they have now given an option to an annual subscription, or for us to provide that option with a very slight discount. So at 10% discount, you will be able to get a full year. So if you're someone who's a patron, currently or want to become a patron and want to be able to subscribe at a little bit of a cheaper rate for you than the $5 a month. So instead of paying, what would it be? I think it's $60. If you're paying every single month over the 12 months of the year at $5, I think you get it for $54 for the entire year. So that's one option for you. If you know that you enjoy the content, you're going to want to have it for the entire year. That's one way to do it, and it supports us, and it really helps out a lot. So if you're planning on doing that, you can get a little bit of a discount there for you.
Yep, and when we do record the episodes on Sunday nights, that may change going into the season. We may add more episodes a week. We don't know that yet for sure. But we go live. We do this thing live on Twitch, twitch.tv/crashthepond. As you can hear, as we're doing this, we get a lot of great feedback from people in the chat, asking questions. And so if you're into that and you actually want to influence the show and what we're discussing, definitely check us out live on Twitch. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you actually get a free Twitch Prime membership. And
I think they are now calling it, because I was looking at this, because I was adding Amazon Prime to my own account and messing with some things with my own account. And I believe it's Twitch Gaming is officially what they're calling it now. It's not Twitch Prime.
Gotcha. So pending on the details maybe there, but if you are an Amazon Prime member, you should have access to some of the plus features on Twitch, and you can actually subscribe to our show on there for free. And that goes a long way for us, and it'll get you some perks in the chat. So, like preferential treatment, for example, when we're asking for questions at the end. So that's at twitch.tv/crashthepond. We are on YouTube, which is kind of become its own little thing, its own little community there in those comments. Those notorious YouTube comments. That's at youtube.com/crashthepond. Make sure to subscribe there and get the notifications turned on so you know when we are posting. But generally speaking, it's going to be either late Sunday evening or early Monday morning. Make sure to check out our website, crashthepond.com. We're also on all of your favorite podcast apps, so Spotify, wherever you do get your podcasts, we're there. Crashthepond.com is the website. It's Crash the Pond on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter, Reindeer Games 91. Just follow him and ask him why Reindeer Games 91.
It's pretty obvious.
Flood his mentions, please. Follow me on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. Shameless plug. I whatever. It's our show. I have an article going up either at the latest, tomorrow or Monday, or so tomorrow or Tuesday, about Ryan Getzlaf at the fourth period. So if you want to read about that, it'll be going up. And on that note, Jake, did you have any final things? Turkey recommendations? Turkey's great. Pie's great. Don't listen to Felix. We didn't get into this debate. Okay, let's do it. Best Thanksgiving foods. Let's do it. Or should we say? Or stuffing. Wait. We have a Patreon episode. We have a Patreon episode coming up. We'll get more in depth on there, but yeah, stuffing is there's your teaser. If you want to hear Felix's awful food takes some more and have me be just disgusted by them, ouch. Become a patron. Harsh. And you'll be able to hear that on the next episode. I think actually doing that post Thanksgiving, because I feel like going to Thanksgiving, you think about these things. It's been a while since you've had it, and it really makes you kind of think about them in a specific way. I think the next day is a great day for us to discuss Thanksgiving food. I don't trust you. Why? Your takes are just inconsistent. But yes, so little snippet there for you of what to expect. But stuffing is the answer. Just want to reiterate that. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Have a great week. Have a great end of the year. We're almost at the finish line. 2020 is almost over. Yeah. So just power through, folks. Have a great day, and we will talk to you at the next show. Bye.